During the training phase, attackers can introduce malicious data that poisons the model, leading to compromised performance or biased outputs. So that is extremely interesting, because if you know, let's say that OpenAI is scraping Stack Overflow, for instance, to get all its training material, you could very easily, introduce complete malicious data into that. Or let's say that, it's scraping a demographic database on, let's say, people and their financial status. And you could go and manipulate that to make certain groups of people look like their financial status is different to reality. Some weird malicious thing like that. So anything that you feel like your business, let's say, could get an advantage of, if OpenAI thinks a certain way, like shipping lanes, right? You could, if you know that OpenAI is scraping certain shipping databases, and if you know that you can somehow get into that and manipulate it, you can make certain lanes look extremely expensive according to the model, and your lanes look extremely cheap and efficient and the best lanes to use. It's all about knowing and figuring out where the models are pulling their data from and manipulating at that point.
But that's manipulating the data that is being scraped from. I mean, it's scraped. So at a macro level, you're kind of going out and you're adding content onto the internet to skew the interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that's even being done at a global level. Yeah. Politically. So interesting consideration.
I don't know if you remember, I'm sure people all know black hat SEO techniques to trick Google's algorithm to get ranked, whether that's, same font color as the background, so you don't see all this big page of keyword loading and things like that. I mean, is it where I could start talking bad shit about another company? Oh, they're a horrible company. You don't want to deal with them. And it's all just hidden within like small files that no one can see. Yeah. But somehow it influences the search results in AI and Google. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the next front of optimization, I guess, that we're going into. And we're in those early days, by the sounds of it, where you can influence things. And it's going to be interesting to see what policies are put in place. I know there are a lot of different governments working on a lot of different policies to prevent things like this. So,
model inversion attacks. So attackers can use the AI model to reverse engineer and infer sensitive information from the training data. So what that means is that if you're able to get a model that another company's created, and they created it from sensitive data or, data very specific to their business, for instance, that they don't necessarily want everyone to use, but they want it in the model, and maybe they felt that they've constructed the model in a way, and their prompts and their layers ahead of that will stop anyone trying to get access to that sensitive information, but they can still ask questions broadly on it, for instance. But what that means is if someone is able to get that model, they can then start reverse engineering it and actually trying to see, how was this model actually trained? And actually start pulling out the data that was used to be trained with, rather than, just trying to get to that source data directly. Because that's not something that you think about. It's sort of going at a model from the, output back into what it was actually trained from. So interesting perception on how you actually solve that. Because you can pour your layers that you want in front of that, but if someone can, reverse engineer it, then they can get that data themselves, which is, interesting use case. I think it even comes more into a side of that you've got databases that you've created, and it's cost you a lot of money to create those databases, and you create a model based on those databases. And again, you may think that, okay, well, the model is something that people can use, but the data is really what makes, what gives us the ability to produce this model, and we can, have our business focused around that maybe. But if someone's able to reverse engineer it, they can get that data themselves and create their own models based on it, which is kind of, stealing your data in a weird way.
I think I heard people who use Slack had some issues where I've heard in the news where Slack was leveraging ChatGPT, but then you have access to a lot of conversations that are private and sensitive.
I think it's a common problem. So that just comes into the side of things that when you use an AI service, you got to make sure that they're not using that data themselves for their own model or storing it off somewhere. It should just answer the question, and then they shouldn't hold on to that data or use it from that point onwards. Those were like the early days of a lot of companies falling into that issue, where they would just go to ChatGPT and paste all their source code, proprietary source code into it, and ask questions, not realizing that source code is now being uploaded into OpenAI. That's a huge thing that I think, especially around privacy, even sensitive information, again, so like hospital records that you think may, you think you may have scraped enough information out of to make it anonymous, but really, if someone spends enough time, they can probably pull it out and infer a lot of privacy around that concerns that you need to look into.